My Little Pony. It's right there in the title of the whole franchise. It's a show about ponies who also just happen to be little. But I assume you all know the show doesn't exclusively feature pony characters. After all, there's the griffins, dragons, changelings, breezies, hippogriff, kirin, bat ponies, and so on. But since the show almost exclusively focuses on the adventures of the main six, which mostly happen in Equestria with other ponies, the show doesn't really give these other species the attention they deserve. So today, let's give some love to our underappreciated non-pony species, and see if we can come up with some interesting character arcs they could have had during the show. So let's just begin with arguably the least forgotten species we will cover today, those being the changelings. You honestly might argue that the changelings aren't even forgotten at all. After all, they make appearances from Season 2 all the way up to Season 9. But it always kind of bugged me that after their very first appearance in the wedding episode, they just kind of vanished. And no, seriously, between the end of Season 2 and Thorax's first appearance midway through Season 6, there are only 2 appearances of a changeling in the show. And even then, both of those are questionable at best. The first one is Kevin, making a brief appearance during the wedding scene in Slice of Life, and the second one is during the Season 5 finale, where Chrysalis and the Changeling show up during one of the alternate timelines. And while they're both real appearances in the show, they don't really mean anything. Kevin is just used for a silly joke and is only on screen for a couple of seconds, and the Changelings in the Season 5 finale literally appear in an alternate timeline, therefore having no impact on the overall story. And while we do get some lore on the changelings after they reformed, mostly about how they're failing to copy pony traditions and that they're just a bunch of softies now, I would have loved to see some more stuff on the changelings before they reformed. How was life in the hive beyond the few flashbacks we see from Thorax? For example, it seems like they've got a strong army, so what was training with them like? Stuff like that, you know? When I asked around in a community poll for all your episode ideas featuring non-pony species, I saw a comment of someone named TogaLord624. Now, you don't have to read this entire thing, though pause if you want to, but the TDLR is they suggest an episode where one of the CMCs has been replaced by a changeling who needed help with a problem of sorts, but he was too timid to ask. So instead he tried to learn their problem-solving skills by hanging out with them, or have an arc where a different changeling hive would rise up under a different queen and see how that would play out. I honestly really like that first idea. It would be such a cool way to show that there might be a softer side to some of the changelings before we get a proper introduction to Thorax. However, the second one about a new hive, not so much. While I'd be all for seeing an all-out war between 2 changeling hives, it doesn't really feel like it would fit very well within the actual show. Though it would be a really cool premise for a fanfiction, if that hasn't been done already at least. And then from the changelings, we move on to the most logical next species. Can you guess what it is? Well, it's the hippogriffs. And if you just ask yourself what those 2 have in common, I guess they can both fly sometimes? Alright, I'm just doing this in whatever order they pop into my mind. I was just trying to make it seem like there was some continuity between these segments, even though there's not. Anyways, this is getting way too self-aware, so take me back to the pastel horsebirds, please. It feels weird to me that the hippogriffs don't even make an appearance in the first 7 seasons. Their first introduction is in the movie, during which we also don't get too much depth into their species beyond them hiding underwater to avoid the Storm King. Fortunately though, we do get quite a lot of hippogriff screen time through Silverstream as part of the Young Six, but as far as the whole species goes, they have a total of 1 episode that tells us more about how they live. That one being Surf and or Turf with the CMC and Terramar. And while it was really cool to see the newfound divide between the hippogriffs that wanted to stay in Sequestria and the ones that moved back to Mount Eris, I would have loved to see more about what life there is actually like, besides just a quick summary of bullet points in the form of a very catchy song like we got now. Like, how did the hippogriffs who decided to move back to Mount Eris adapt? I can imagine that the Storm King destroyed all their villages and infrastructure. Or what if a baby hippogriff was born in Sequestria during their hiding, but the parents now decide to move back above the water? That kid has never learned how to fly or walk. And the same thing would honestly go for all of the adults. Suddenly having to walk and fly again after not using your wings and legs for years had to have been a struggle, I imagine. Damn, I could have capitalized off of that. Anyways, as you can tell, I could go on about this for hours, but unfortunately we don't have hours. Or well, technically I can make these videos as long as I want, but I can't imagine that would be very entertaining to watch. Regardless, Forgotten Species, right. I was honestly debating whether or not I would include griffins or dragons in this video too. They are non-pony species, sure, but both of them are relatively prominent throughout the seasons. After all, Spike is unfortunately present in almost every single episode, and we already meet Gilda in the 5th episode of the show. Additionally, both griffins and dragons have some pretty decent lore compared to the other species on this list. We learn all about dragon culture through Spike visiting the Dragonlands in earlier seasons, and even more so thanks to Ember later on in the show. As for the griffins, we get a pretty good view of their culture through the Lost Treasure of Griffinstone episode, together with the stories we hear from Gallus in Season 8. Because of that, I think it's reasonable to further exclude them from this video. However, I do want to mention that in response to my poll, there were several people who said they would have loved to see a Griffin-dedicated episode showing how the town of Griffinstone might have improved after the events of the Lost Treasure of Griffinstone, which I think would have been a really good idea. There were also some comments of people talking about the bat ponies, which is such a forgotten species that I myself forgot to include them in the post. And honestly, I can't even blame myself for that. We literally know nothing about them. The only big appearance they have is during the Bats episode in Season 4, and even then I'm pretty sure that is different from the actual bat ponies. After all, Fluttershy only transformed after being bitten by a vampire fruit bat, and even then the transformations only seem to happen at night, almost like a werewolf, whereas Luna's Royal Guard seem to just be bat ponies with no further strings attached. There were over 10 comments under the poll that mentioned the bat ponies, but unfortunately none of them mentioned an idea for an episode or story arc, so let's think of one ourselves. I personally always thought of the bat ponies as being more of a reserved species. They stick together and kind of leave the rest of Equestria alone, similar to what the Kirin do. The easiest way to introduce them would probably be through a friendship quest into bat pony territory, likely with Twilight and Applejack. Twilight because of her eagerness to learn about a quote-unquote new species, and Applejack because she seems to heavily dislike the bats, which would give them a very interesting dynamic together, with a lot of potential for friendship lessons. It could also be something about Luna wanting to get more representation for the bat ponies, since she seems to be the only one to actually acknowledge them as they're a part of their royal guard. Although, like the all-out Changeling war that was suggested earlier, that kind of topic might be a little bit too loaded for what is still a children's show. I'd still love to see it though. Now, for our second to last species in this video, the Draconequus, aka Discord species. And for those of you who haven't read the comics, Discord isn't actually the only Draconequus out there. We also see his ex, Cosmos, and his cousin Eris. Do they look anything alike? Not one bit. But does that somehow make sense because they're all creatures of chaos? I guess? Regardless, it would have been cool to see more about the origins of the Draconequus, or even Discord specifically during the show. Discord obviously has plenty of screen time, but almost all of it focuses on his redemption or just overall weird shenanigans. I would have loved to learn more about their origins. How did Discord come to be? How did he gain his power? Are there more of them out there beside Discord, Cosmos, and Eris? Orcustilfin77 theorizes that Discord might have just been a mistake from the universe, and that the Draconequus were just a myth, based on Discord himself. Which is a very interesting theory, honestly. And then, for the final species of this video, we have one that was by far the most suggested out of all of your comments. If you haven't watched my video where I shuffled around the seasons of G4, I highly recommend you go do so. At least after you finish watching this one at least. But if you have, you'll know how I feel about the Kirin, and how I would have loved to see them be introduced into the show a lot earlier. That way, there could have been a lot more opportunity to develop their stories. After all, the Kirin only appear in 3 episodes in the entire show. And before you ask, the other 2 are during the big battle in the ending of the end and the last problem. Which is really sad because the whole premise of the Kirin had so much potential. Just imagine this. As we see in the Sounds of Silence episode, Autumn Blaze has finally shown the entire Kirin village that staying quiet all the time is not the answer to their problems. All the Kirin are finally beginning to talk and socialize again, even though it's very slow and careful at first. But as time goes by, the village starts returning to the hub of social activities it was before the silence, just like we see in Autumn Blaze's flashbacks. Then, eventually, one of the Kirin, which honestly would likely be Autumn Blaze herself, would want to move out into Equestria and start living in Ponyville, which on its own could be a full episode. Then, as the seasons go by, more Kirin would likely move in. Perhaps they could have made one of the young Six a Kirin. You know, like, screw Gallus, let's replace him with a Kirin that has the same temper and deeper insecurities of fitting in as he has, but also with the risk of him going Neric if things don't work out. That would create such a cool dynamic with a little more raised stakes. Oh, okay, maybe that's a bit extreme. Gallus is awesome, and I wouldn't want to ditch him. As a matter of fact, I kind of regret ranking him so low in my Stallions video. He deserved a spot higher up on the list. Anyways, let's instead picture this. We would have a Kirin as part of the Young Six, that, just like Gallus, Yona, and Acellus, would struggle with fitting into the pony world. But where their way of dealing with this is through relying on their friends and professors to help them, the Kirin's coping mechanism would be through anger. That alone would open up a bunch of possibilities for episode featuring the Kirin, and even a way to throw in some Kirin lore through flashbacks or talks about how things were back home, which is a very similar approach to what the show did with the Griffins. Speaking of flashbacks about how things were back home, I know I said the Kirin were the last species of the video, but before we wrap things up, I wanted to put this specific comment in the spotlight. Chaotic Pan 333 commented, "I would have liked to have an arc where there were school field trips to the lands with other creatures to explore more cultures, and see the Student 6 bond with their cultures and learn about each other's culture firsthand." And I honestly think this is an absolutely phenomenal idea. We occasionally hear the Young Six talk about how things are at home throughout Season 8, but it would have been so insanely cool to see the entire group visit each other's homes. Having a couple of episodes dedicated to that, or even a special or something, would have been so cool. And it would have made this entire video completely useless. Wait, then why didn't I just start with this?